طيب بسم الله الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. أما بعد، إخوتي الكرام وأخواتي، السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. حياكم الله جميعا وبياكم. Glad to be back, inshallah, for another one of our episodes. Every now and then we have these occasional lessons, seminars on events, dates, festivals, that come around each year. So this time it's all about Valentine's Day, which is in about 2 days. Or actually no, it's tomorrow. It's tomorrow. Or actually no, for people watching me in America, it's actually in 2 days now. Because for us in Europe, we're already the 13th. For you guys, it's still the 12th. So as everybody you probably knows, the 14th is Valentine's Day. Now, some are saying the recording isn't on. Are we streaming? Are we good? Just want to make sure before I continue. Are we streaming? Nah, okay, okay. It's all good. It's all good. I don't think it's a problem if it's I'm streaming live. We're streaming live, inshallah. So it'll be recorded anyways. So no worries. طيب, no problem, no problems. Don't worry about it, inshallah. All right, so let's get into it. So I'll make sure we sh share the screen. There we go. All right, here we go. So we are back now for Valentine's Day, as we were saying. So inshallah, let's get into it. So Valentine's Day, it's a big deal for a lot of people, right? Valentine's Day, brothers and sisters, is a very famous holiday. As we're going to see, it's you know, let's say presented by a lot of companies and stuff for for the consumer. And many times these type of holidays, we don't know what their origin is. So let's get into the origin, inshallah, of Valentine's Day. Especially us as Muslims, we want to know what we're dealing with. A lot of our youth um might be celebrating this holiday in one way or another, and they don't know what it's all about. So I know, first of all, what's interesting is in the name Saint Valentine's as a Muslim should already be problematic just because of the saint. And we know that saint, when we hear saint, that this is not from our tradition, and this is from the Catholic tradition. So that should already be food for thought and enough for people to pause and have doubts. But as we will see, the origins of Valentine's Day go much further than that. So what are the origins of Valentine's Day? We have here the dark origins of Valentine's Day, which is the feast or the festival called Lupercalia. Now, Lupercalia, and as you will see, this is a trend, by the way. Those who have done a lot of these lessons and seminars with me, they'll notice that it's always the same story. It's always the same trend. And the trend is there was some mushrik Roman or Greek celebration or festival. And over time, this transferred and was Christianized and became like a Christian festival or feast or holiday. And this just transferred into the modern Western world and the modern Western culture. So a lot of these things can really just be traced back to Greek or Roman culture, which of course we know was steeped in shirk. And this is a great example. So there's a lot of, I guess, debate on what is the precursor to the modern Valentine's Day. The furthest historians are able to go back is here to this festival called Lupercalia. Lupercalia is a Roman festival, or was a Roman festival. As you can see here, we have an article from history.com that talk about the fact that Lupercalia, one of the opinions is that Lupercalia was a festival in honor of the founders of Rome. The founders of Rome are Romulus and Remus. So this has been traced back as far as the 6th century, and this celebration was held in February, and in general in the middle of February. Um, and this was a festival of fertility and dedicated to some of the Roman gods. We have here, for example, Faunus, and we said, like we said, in honor of the founders of Rome. Um, Eventually, as we will see, it became like the holiday of a in remembrance or in honor of a Christian saint. But we didn't we'll get to that inshallah. As of now, we're still in the Roman period. So some um evidence that Valentine's Day goes back to Lupercalia. First of all, the date, and as we will see, a lot of the facts that this date continued to be a celebration, and that certain things regarding certain themes are current. Themes of love and so on, fertility, all of these things remain recurrent throughout history up until the present day. Um, Lupercalia, of course, whoever says Roman festival also says shirk, possible murder, zina, and all of these haram things are based in the festival of Lupercalia as usual. This is nothing new. We have here, for example, the sacrifice of animals, goats, and so on that represent sexuality. So you have these themes of love and sexuality and all these things. They already developed in the earliest evidences that we have of a version of Saint Valentine's. Then we have here other from this history.com article, other basically points or information about this festival. For example, the use of blood, and blood is an important theme as well because it is linked to the color red. So we see a lot of the red color associated with Valentine's Day. So this red color is something that goes back to the Feast of Lupercalia, um, and can be linked to blood and so on. These Roman sacrifices, all of these are steeped in Roman culture. So it was a ritual of sacrifice, and who knows what else would go on. We also have other points here. Why the founders of Rome? Okay, why honor the founders of Rome? Because there is something linked here to celibacy. So we're always in these themes of love, celibacy, sexuality, fertility, which is, linked to the story of the founders of Rome. You can see here. And, it keeps, so goes back to the foundation of Rome. They have these themes that then transferred into this festival and were focused upon in the festival of Lupercalia. Um, and also one of the other Roman gods that was honored in Lupercalia is Lupercus, which is the main reason for the festival of Lupercalia. It's a festival of fertility. Now, as usual, um, these types of festivals like Lupercalia, they transfer eventually into Christian tradition. There were some resistance, or there was some resistance rather. A lot of the Christian priests and so on, they considered these pagan rituals to be prohibited or to be innovation. But eventually, these found their way into Christian tradition as well. We have here an we have here an excerpt from classical philology, which is basically about um, Roman how the Roman festival of Lupercalia may have transferred into other Christian festivals that eventually became what we know today as Valentine's Day. So we have here, debate about how this transfer occurred exactly. But we understand here the big deal is the date. We understand that these dates are similar. Some of them mention the 14th, some of them mention the 15th. So it's really around this same date, right? Which leads us to the question of who is Saint Valentine. Here, there's a lot of Christian legends about who Saint Valentine could be. So we have many stories. One Roman legend says that one of the emperors he martyred a Catholic priest called Valentine. Okay, and this again was he martyred him because he was marrying people soldiers in secret. So a lot of soldiers in Roman Empire were not allowed to get married. So because he was doing this in secret, it was illegal. He was marrying them in secret, so he was martyred. And then it became, this is one version, one legend. Then it became known as Saint Valentine's Day in honor of this Catholic priest and his martyrdom according to the Catholic faith. Um, and then you have other stories here that you can read here. Um, so we understand that it's a martyr. Okay, so according to the Christian faith, all of these are possible martyrs of Christianity, and they became saints. The Catholics, they have this tradition of saints. Of course, the saints, a lot of it has to do with shirk because they give godly powers or divine powers to the saints. Many times the saints are an intermediary between the Catholics and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They set up the saints as intermediaries between Allah, between them and Allah, and they make dua to the saints and so on. So it's interesting, the Catholic saints, they almost replaced the Roman gods. How the Romans used to pray to the Roman gods, the Catholics pray to the Catholic saints. So they pray to the saint of fertility, the saint of love, the saint of this, the saint of power, the saint of that, the saint of this. Just like you have the god of fertility, the Roman god of fertility, the Roman god of this, the Roman god of that. So we see here how, once again, this is part of the larger discussion of how Roman tradition really just corrupted the Christian faith away from Tawheed, the original Tawheed of Jesus, into what is known today, which is basically a mix of the prophetic tradition with the shirki traditions of the Roman Empire. So we understand hence that the Catholic, we can see here at the bottom, the strongest theory and what evidence suggests is that basically the martyrdom of Saint Valentine, whoever he was, there's various stories and legends about who this Saint Valentine was. But the point is that one of the popes in the 5th century eventually just eradicated or just replaced the festival of Lupercalia with the honoring of Saint Valentine. Um, so this is, and then eventually it became what it became over time. So over time, it was kept being associated with love and fertility and all these same themes that we have seen from the beginning. Um, it started becoming commercial. Now, of course, I didn't mention it here. Every now and then we have nobles throughout history who start making Valentine's a stronger tradition. We have certain nobles, certain princes, certain kings. They send letters on Valentine's Day, things like this in the Western world, France, England, and so on. You have Shakespeare in England, who also plays a role in making Valentine's Day even more known and famous, and basically making it a deeper tradition than it already was. And then eventually, it started becoming commercialized, particularly in the United States. Of course, we have the question of who is Cupid, because nowadays Cupid is associated with Valentine's Day. So Cupid is considered to be the Roman god of love. I have seen as well some mentioning Cupid as a Greek god. So it seems that there's a khilaf here, but he's either Roman or Greek, right? And it's not looking good from the perspective of Tawheed, because once again, Cupid is usually mentioned as a god, or the son of a god, or things like this. So he became heavily associated, Cupid, with Valentine's Day, and even love in general. This is deep in our culture now. We have the expressions around Cupid. I got struck by Cupid. This is an expression to say I fell in love. All of these things are deep now in our culture. And we have this tradition built over time, associated with Cupid and others. And same with the same themes of love, sex, and so on, fertility. And we have this commercial and consumer, project built around this. Of course, gifts start being exchanged, letters, flowers, candy, roses, which goes back to the theme of red that we mentioned. Um, and once again, it goes back to the idea of everything we mentioned, that most of the festivals and the traditions that we know of today are deep, steeped in either Roman or Greek culture, usually Roman, because that was what had the most impact historically on the Western world and even other parts of the world. So a lot of our modern traditions we have to be careful of. And this does not mean that everything we do is haram, because a lot of things are, even the logos, even the cars that we drive, like a lot of these things, they go back to Roman tradition. A lot of the names of places. So we're not saying everything is haram here. But what we're saying is that when it comes to festivals and celebrations, this is a little bit different than everything else. Okay, so as we're about to see, celebrations are a little bit different to the name of your car or the name of the street and so on. Because festivities, rituals, traditions, all of these things, the Prophet ﷺ gave specific guidelines about. Now, Valentine's Day, a commercial holiday, prepared for the consumer. We can see here a chart that indicates the annual spending on Valentine's Day. Um, so this is in America. And once again, we have, billions being spent in Valentine's Day. So of course, this is also a business, businesses and corporations, they're going to push this, right? So if you find yourself being, attracted by Valentine's Day, or if you find yourself celebrating in some sort of fashion Valentine's Day, well, remember that it's being pushed by people that really just want to take your money. On top of the fact that it originates in shirk and haram and so on. Um, Never forget that these type of things are pushed in order for corporations to take your money. So very similar to Christmas on this issue. This is what we have to be careful about as well. So if these things are pushed, don't be surprised. Now, so what are the rulings regarding Valentine's Day? Here I just mentioned a lot of the rulings that we saw before. There's not a lot of new things here. We mentioned already the very important hadith, the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that basically mentions that we only have two Eids as Muslims. Okay, so the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he saw a celebration, or he saw a day that was important in Jahiliyyah, that the people of Medina, or some of the Sahaba might have engaged in. And when he asked and they told him what it was all about, he replied by saying, "Inna Allah qad abdalakum bihima khayran minhuma yawm al-adha wa yawm al-fitr." He said, Allah has given you two celebrations that are better than everything else, the day of Adha and the day of Fitr, yani Eid al-Adha and Eid al-Fitr. And hence, this has given us the principle, as we mentioned. The principle is that when it comes to celebrations, yearly celebrations, the Muslims only are allowed to celebrate two events or two dates, Eid al-Adha and Eid al-Fitr. And this is when it comes to al-Eid, to yearly celebration. Of course, Muslims are allowed to celebrate in general. You might celebrate because you got married. You might celebrate because you have a child, aqiqah. You might celebrate because you passed your exams. You might celebrate because you graduated. You might celebrate because Syria was liberated. You might celebrate because there's a ceasefire in Gaza. There's many reasons why a Muslim can celebrate. But you'll notice that these celebrations are halal. Why? Because they're not yearly celebrations. They're occasional celebrations linked to certain events that happen, but they don't have a yearly date. Unlike Christmas, unlike New Year's, unlike St. Valentine's Day, unlike Easter. All of these have a yearly date that that is the same, and that keeps coming every year. This is the point of Eid. Eid comes from the word, as we said in Arabic, عاد يعود, which means to return. So an Eid is a celebration that returns yearly. Um, this is where we have strict rules. We have very free rules, liberal rules when it comes to general celebrations as Muslims. When it comes to yearly celebrations, here, this is where we have strict rules. And why? Because we base the strict rules on this hadith. This hadith, the Prophet ﷺ has given us strict rules, which is when it comes to yearly celebrations, we're only allowed to do two, which is the Eid of Al-Adha, of sacrifice, and the Eid of Fitr, which is the end of Ramadan. Of course, the Prophet ﷺ also mentioned in a famous hadith that we will follow the ways of the previous nations. يعني to the point where if a lizard were to enter a hole, or if they were to enter rather the hole of a lizard, we would follow them. And when they asked, the Sahaba asked, Ya Rasulullah, al-Yahud wa Nasara, the Prophet replied, Faman. Yani when they asked, are you speaking about the Jews and the Christians when you say the previous nation? And the Prophet replied, who else? Who else could it be? Of course, when I say previous nations, I'm speaking about the Jews and the Christians. Now, of course, we have the famous hadith as well, من تشبه بقوم فهو منهم. The Prophet said, whoever imitates a people is one of them. And the ulama here mention that what is meant by imitation is imitating a people in what is specific to them. Okay? So some people don't understand what we mean by at-tashabbuh, which is imitation. And you have to understand what we mean by imitation. Imitation means you are following a tradition that is specific to the kuffar. A tradition that when you think about it, you envision, you picture kuffar doing it because that is what is known. Okay? So when we picture and imagine Valentine's Day, Christmas, and all of this, even though we know that some Muslims out of ignorance might celebrate it, we know that this is specific to the kuffar. We know that this is what the kuffar do, and this is their traditions and so on. So there's no khilaf regarding this. Of course, at-tashabbuh as well is directly linked to celebrations because these celebrations are steeped in culture, as we mentioned, and traditions, and these are not from the traditions of the Muslims. So when it comes to celebrations, there is not a lot of leeway in terms of what is tashabbuh and what is not tashabbuh, right? So celebrations in general are considered tashabbuh, particularly yearly celebrations, particularly yearly celebrations, because these are part of traditions that are not our traditions. We have our own traditions when it comes to celebration. Then we have here as well Ibn Qayyim. Ibn Qayyim, he warns us, from the great ulama, from the students of Shaykh al-Islam Taymiyyah. Ibn Qayyim warns us of congratulating the non-Muslims on their festivals and their celebrations, which he says is haram by ijma'. So careful of saying Happy Valentine's Day, or be careful of somebody saying Happy Valentine's Day and you replying, and to you too, okay? Because that would mean that you are congratulating or you are agreeing with the congratulations. So if anybody tells you Happy Valentine's Day, you say, you don't have to be mean about it. You can still kind of give da'wah. You don't have to be harsh. You can say, thank you for thinking about me, but I don't celebrate Valentine's, or I don't agree with Valentine's. Find a formula, but basically you have to be clear that you don't agree with this, um, in some way, shape, or form. Al-Muhim, the most important thing is to not respond with agreement or congratulations, because that would mean you participate hence in the celebration. Ibn Taymiyyah as well said that Muslims are not allowed to single out the festivals of the kuffar, um, but that rather we should take, and this is how the Muslims should act during Valentine's Day and during Christmas, and we mentioned this many times. Well, how does the Muslim act? The Muslim acts like it's any other day of the year. Nothing special. Muslims wake up on Valentine's Day, it's as if it's another day. It's just another day. It's a regular day, right? So you shouldn't single out any particular activity, linked to the themes of Valentine on Valentine's Day, because then this, intention-wise, this can start becoming problematic. Like, why you singling out, for example, why are you, I don't know, giving a love letter to your wife on Valentine's Day, for example, specifically. And once again, this is also a reminder to us, brothers and sisters, of course, Islam is not against love. And we are very clear with this. Of course, Islam believes in the purity of love between a man and wife, which is in the context of marriage. So Islam encourages love in the context of marriage. Of course, Islam also does not limit love to the context of marriage. We, as Muslims, believe there are different types of love. There is love between a servant and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There is religious love. There is natural love between a mother and son, father, daughter, husband and wife. And then there's even a stronger bond between husband and wife, and so on and so forth in many cases. So all of these are different types of love, and we encourage love. And the romantic love is encouraged in Islam as long as it is halal in the context of marriage. So singling out a specific day goes against the maqasid, meaning the objectives of the Sharia, because you're supposed to love your wife every day as a husband, and a wife is supposed to love her husband every day, and they shouldn't single out a specific day to show their affection. This should be done throughout the year at various, moments throughout the year. Um, and Valentine's Day and things, it sometimes can even play on expectations. People might even have couple problems or problems in their couple due to Valentine's Day because they put all these expectations on certain dates and certain moments. And in the end, if somebody doesn't deliver, in the way that they were supposed to, maybe this becomes a problem because there was an expectation, and all these problems are extra problems for nothing. When at the end of the day, you don't even have to choose a date. Throughout the year, at whatever moment, you can show your affection and be romantic in the halal context. So as Ibn Taymiyyah says, live your regular life on any of these celebrations. And we'll end here with the fatwa of Shaykh ibn Uthaymeen, rahimahullah, specifically on Valentine's Day. There are a few fatwa. We have fatwa of Shaykh ibn Jibreen, rahimahullah. We have fatwa of the Standing Committee. I chose this fatwa, very simple. And then you can research other fatwa, but they kind of pretty much all say the same thing, that this is not you know, a Muslim holiday. This goes against a lot of the Muslim traditions and so on. So the Sheikh Ibn Uthaymeen, he replies by saying that, of course, Valentine's Day is not permitted for a Muslim. It's innovated and has no basis in the Sharia. And it's interesting because even from the Christian point of view, it's an innovation. So they innovated it. It was not originally in the Christian tradition. They innovated it, you know, by basically taking it from the Roman tradition. So when we say it's an innovation, it's not only an innovation for us, it's also an innovation for the people of the book. So that's the first point. Then he says, it calls for people to keep their hearts and minds busy with foolish things that go against the guidance of the Salaf. So once again, you know, this is the case because a lot of haram is done on this day, and it keeps people busy in things that are not necessarily halal and so on, and it keeps them busy in traditions that are problematic. And of course, as we mentioned as well, these type of days, like Valentine's and so on, they're used as a particular day to show affection. When at the end of the day, this is a waste. It's a waste of time to spend, you know, to have all this expectation and energy into one day, where all you have to do is live a regular life and show your affection naturally at all times and or at any time. So a lot of energy goes into these type of celebrations, and that makes people, you know, waste a lot of time and even maybe attaches their heart to futilities. Okay, so they get attached to these celebrations and so on. So the Muslim should, as Shaykh Ibn Uthaymeen says, the Muslim should stay away from the customs of this holiday and its symbols. And that is better. That is better for the Muslim to protect himself from the fitan. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect us and grant us more knowledge. So I thank you all, Jazakumullah khairan, for listening to the lecture, and inshallah I'll open up the floor for Q&A for those who want to remain, and for those who need to leave. And hopefully I'll see you next time. Inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. أقول قولي هذا استغفر الله لي ولكم فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم وآخر دعوانا الحمد لله رب العالمين. So I'll open up the floor for Q&A بإذن الله تعالى. تفضلوا. If there are any questions, if there are any questions, I'll take them, inshallah. Okay, so we have brother asking question: are we allowed to purchase candy that is sometimes discounted on Valentine's Day to save and to give to someone on a later date? Here, if you make the intention, if you make the intention to buy that candy, okay, uh, for the occasion of Valentine's, then this is problematic because that would mean that you're participating on some level. But if you're living your regular life and you happen to see some discounted candy at the store for Valentine's Day, could be for Valentine's Day, and then at another time could be for another reason, and you decide to buy that candy, then you didn't single out Valentine's Day. So this is the difference. As we mentioned, Shaykh Ibn Uthaymeen, or rather Shaykh Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah, said that we shouldn't single out Valentine's Day for anything special. So if you're singling out Valentine's Day to buy candy because it's discounted, then I would discourage that. I would discourage that. I would not